So I did a thing. Yes, I had the honour and privilege to be able to become a commentator for the recent BXL event in Jakarta, Indonesia. It was an unbelievable experience. So many memories, so many cool things happened, but I will get to that a little later because the main reason I want to do this video is because obviously I did a preview for this video going through some of the changes, the format, etc. So now I want to spend this time, now the event's done, to review it, to kind of go through the things that I liked, the changes that they made, and also offer up some opinions on maybe what they could do better in the future. Because whilst I feel it was a huge leap forward, I still think there are probably a few things that they could do better to improve it even more. And actually, on that subject, I do want to get you guys involved as well, but that will come right at the end of the video. And just to give it away slightly, there's going to be a giveaway attached to it. So hang around for that, or you could, as YouTube clearly offers, skip forward. But I hope you don't do that because I want you to stick around. I want you to listen to what I got to say. And yeah, I'm going to do that in this video. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into this video, me reviewing the Badminton Excel event 2025. Now, of course, I've just realised that some of you watching might be thinking, Ben, what the hell is Badminton Excel? What is BXL? And to that I say, well, if you follow me, you must have watched it because I was involved. No, I'm joking. You might have just missed it or whatever. You know, the marketing, one of the things that definitely needs to improve is obviously the marketing around it. They did have a lot of growth within their social. They doubled their social media. There was some good, based on what I can see, viewing figures on YouTube, and I know it was broadcast through TV at a number of countries. So I think overall the viewing stuff is somewhat promising. I think they're expecting a little bit more, but obviously there's going to be some of you watching that might be thinking, you know, clicking on the video going, oh, what's this? Not quite knowing what it is. So let me very quickly go through it. So the BXL is a unique badminton team event designed to complement, not compete with the BWF World Tour. That's quite a unique, sorry, not unique. That's quite an important distinction to make, and one that was said over and over. This is not designed to take away from the BWF. In fact, it's designed to complement it, to add more for the players, more for badminton in general. That's the main thing. There are 32 players involved with the BXL, and they were split into 4 teams: the Hurricanes, the Lightning, the Rockets, and the Blitzers. Each team was made up of 4 men and 4 women, and within that, each tie was made up of 4 matches. You had a 3v3, starting the match with a 3v3, which was 2 men and 1 woman on the court. Then there was women's singles, men's singles, and then another 3v3, but this time it was 2 women and 1 male player on the court. Each match within that is made up of best of 4 games. There's no limit to the points that you can score, whether it's a minimum or maximum. You play for time, and each game is made up of 8 minutes. Obviously, at the end of the game, the person who's winning wins the game. There obviously was an element called a pressure point. There was that implemented where if the score was in 3, then there would be additional points played. And the way the pressure point worked was, say I was winning and it was 11-8, so it's within 3, we go to the pressure point. I need to get to 12. For my opponent to win, they must also reach 12. And obviously if it was 11-9, they'd only have to score 3 points, 11-10, 2 points, obviously 11 all. If it was a tie at the end, then it would be pretty much a deciding point or sudden death point. Very simple. If a match was 2 games all, because obviously, you know, best of 4, that's an even number, you could be 2 all, it would then go into a decided by a shuttle showdown, which was basically additional points. The players don't change ends, they literally finish the 4th game and are supposed to go straight into the shuttle showdown. And the shuttle showdown is basically a maximum of 5 rallies, so it could end 3-2, obviously the player of 3 wins. But if a player got a gap of 2 points, so 2-love or 3-1, then that also finished the game. And I think every time we had a shuttle showdown, it ended 2-love. So that's how that worked. The tie points, so obviously singles was only worth 1 tie point, 3v3s were worth 3. So they became incredibly important. And as the tournament progressed, they were kind of the deciding factor. But that was by design, because obviously 3v3 is the most unique element to BXL. And so they wanted to have that at the center of the tournament. If obviously, as you could work out, there's potential for it to end an overall tie to end 4 all. So if a team wins 1 3v3 and 1 singles, and obviously their team does that, it would end 4 all. And if that happened, then it would go to an ultimate shuttle showdown, where there would be a game, one game up to 5 points. There's no, if you're winning by 2 or 3 it ends, it's literally the first to 5. And that would be either a women's singles or a men's singles. How that was decided would be that before the tie got underway, each team would nominate whether they want a women's singles player or a men's singles player to play. The team that reached 4 points first would then get their choice. And for the most part, most teams had different choices. It was actually, I think, only once I saw on the team sheet where both teams had selected either a men's singles or a women's singles. Usually there was a little bit different. So it actually, for me, they didn't make that publicly aware to people, but for me, I could see it because I had the team sheets. It made it quite interesting, especially in the final, actually. I might mention that a little later if I can remember. Obviously, the top 2 teams, the way the groups are decided was when you win a overall tie, you get 1 tie point, or one, I can't remember what the terminology was, but 1 tie point. If those were even, which did actually happen, there were 3 teams finished the groups on 2 points, then it would go down to games difference. And if those were still even, it would go down to points difference. And I think there was further on, like if it went further, it was the head-to-head between the two. You know, as you have to run out every single thing. But they were the main ones. So yeah, as Des, who was my co-commentator, the lead commentator, said whenever he used to do the spiel before every match, it sounds quite complicated. And I probably haven't explained it brilliantly there. But if you watch one tie, so one overall stream, they're all up on the SPO TV YouTube channel. If you click on the live button on there, they're all there. I'll probably put a link up for everyone in the description. If you watch one, honestly, you'll be able to follow it. It's not overly complicated. I think I saw online some people commenting like, "Oh, this is too what's going on? Who wins? Who's this?" Honestly, if you just sit there and watch one tie, you'll understand it. It's super, super simple, and I think that's quite a nice way to do it. So that's kind of what BXL is. Now, obviously, this isn't the first time BXL has been run. Last year, they had the inaugural event, and obviously I did a video on that, and kind of that's how I got involved with BXL this year, because they saw my video. And when and obviously from there, one of the things I said was the commentary. And so they said, well, if you think you can do a better job, and we've seen your YouTube stuff, we've seen your online presence, we think you'd be good for it. So obviously that was one change. But based off of that video, when I got to Jakarta and in some of the weeks leading up, I was speaking to a number of people involved, because it's a huge production, as you can imagine. There's multiple teams and numerous people, when I was talking to all of them, mingling in. And they said actually my video and what I was saying, they took on board all that advice and were like trying to implement some of the things I did. Obviously, they take the general overall view of what I said, so maybe we can shorten the games, obviously the kit, etc. And they kind of took that away and they thought about it. And obviously, the people in charge have a much better understanding, not of badminton per se, but on how to create a narrative and create a story and create something that people can watch and follow and get behind. And I'm no expert on that. That's where they come in. But they took my ideas and were able to mold it. And they were talking to me all the way through the week on how they can further improve that. And that's kind of the point of this video, actually. But again, I'll get to that at the end. So there's lots of things that they did change, and I kind of want to go through a number of them. I got them here. So the first one is the kit. I think the 2 biggest things that people said last year was the commentary. Strike, 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 strike. That was one. Obviously, they changed that because I was there. But the other one was the kit, because it was basically a one-size-fits-all, although it didn't fit anyone. Even Victor Axelsen, who is an absolute unit, barely fit. It was still drowning him slightly. The kit was all one size and very, very large. So obviously this year the designs overall stayed pretty much the same, but they went with a different company. They had different sizings and it actually had a different fit, because a number of the players actually ordered, say for example, I was speaking to Mathias Christiansen, and he played last year and he said, well, based on it, I want a 2XL. And then when he got there, he had to downsize to an XL because the fit was different. They were able to quickly turn that around because they had the people that were producing it there, so they could quickly turn that around. But the different sizes and all that kind of stuff was obviously a fantastic change. There were still players that tucked it in, but I don't think that's because it was too large. Maybe that's just the way it felt. It was quite comfortable. And actually, I've got a pair of the shorts, and they are Really, I was wearing them today, this morning when I went to the gym. They're really comfortable, and like I said, I've got a few shirts on me, and they're also really, really comfortable. Next thing, these are in no particular order, by the way. These are just notes. I've just written them down off the top of my head, so there's no real order to these. The next one is the pressure point, which I thought. I think last year they had something similar. They had the golden point. They had it, but the problem was, and I was speaking to the producers about this, and they said that last year, whilst they did have this sort of situation to keep games interesting, they had different names. There was no like way that they there was no conformity to it. So people, if you're watching at home, you weren't sure if it was a golden point, was it a gap of two, was it this, was it that? The pressure point made it very clear, gave it a clear narrative, which I think is underlining a lot of the changes. They try to create a storyline through the BXL, which I think is really, really fantastic. So the pressure point was really good, and obviously they happened a lot. I think we had almost 50 pressure points over the course of 4 days, which leads on to the next one, is that the teams were pretty evenly spread. There were some teams with some clear disadvantages. For example, the Rockets, they only had 2 doubles players on the men's side, which meant that, and they were Ardianto and Toei, Toei, and obviously as a result, they weren't really rested, especially Toei, and that he was absolutely knackered by the end. By finals day, there were some matches where it was almost like he couldn't move. He didn't quite have the energy that he showed earlier in the week. And as he was leaving the arena on finals day, because obviously the Rockets did get to the final, I saw him and I went, Chapek, which means I'm tired. And he was like, yes, very, very tired. So I told him to go get a good rest. And actually, there were some of the other players on the team generally were quite tired by the end. I think the different format, etc., even though some of the games might have been shorter, say for the singles players, but I think the mental strain that the time format got onto them did exhaust them by the end. But yeah, no, the teams were pretty evenly spread. Like I said, there was some disadvantages, but overall they were pretty even, shown by how many pressure points we got. I know there were some games that on the scoreline looked quite large, but that's mainly because some teams were able to win both 303s, which obviously equates to so many more points. So the scoreline, the overall tie score could seem quite large, but watching it live and being there, obviously if you watch any of it on YouTube or on TV, all those matches, even if they did go, say both one team won both 3v3s, generally speaking, they were close. There weren't many 4-0s in matches, and even if there weren't many truly one-sided. There might have been 1 or 2, but not. The overall was that the games were close, and they were competitive and very, very exciting. So overall, the other one was I didn't obviously get to watch too much of the production. Some evenings, like I was finishing at the arena at 10:30, 11 o'clock. And then obviously hanging around to kind of have not necessarily a debrief, but speak with the producers to go over what was good, what needs to be changed. And so I would generally get home and be showered and ready for bed by midnight. So obviously, and then up quite early the next day. Although we started in the afternoon, I had to prepare for the next day and I had some other things to do. So it was quite a full-on few days for me. So I didn't really get too much chance to kind of watch. I did watch bits and pieces. And from what I saw, I think the overall production of the event, how it was shown on TV, was a massive, massive upgrade. Based on what I can remember last year, the quality of the video wasn't so good. This year was obviously high quality and they had more camera angles. They had, I think the way that they were trying to produce it and between cutting from this and doing slow-mo replays was far better this year. But that's something that maybe you guys can, the people that actually watched it more on TV, can comment better in the comment section below. But from the bits I saw, it was much, I think personally, better than last year. It looked clearer, had different camera angles, and actually that is something they are looking into for next year's BXL event. I was actually speaking, they had a guy, because obviously this was run by Spo TV, and they had just employed someone relatively new, like literally probably 2 or 3 weeks before this event started, and he was there and he was running bits and pieces like the media day they had beforehand, but he was observing, because I think in the future productions he might be one of the leads, or he's going to be involved in somehow. I'm not quite sure, but me and him were talking, we got chatting quite a lot, and he was picking my brain as to what camera angles are different and unique, and what can they bring to badminton that could make it something exciting and new. And obviously I spoke of the angle we all know of, all badminton fans know, the nice camera angle where it's just off to the side of the court, maybe a little bit raised. That angle is absolutely beautiful to watch, and any angle where it's just around the court, a little bit closer in, makes the game look like the true speed, because the standard camera angle can not really convey the speed of badminton. as well as we know what the speed is. Obviously, if you watch it live, you're like, wow. But on the TV, it doesn't quite come across. So obviously, it's never going to be as good, but is there ways that they can improve it? And I know that the guy behind the production, the guy that employed me for this, he was behind WTT, so the new kind of table tennis world tour. And obviously he was talking about how he played around with different camera angles on how table tennis could be done. And obviously he wants to try and do the same with badminton. So yeah, whilst I felt the broadcast was really, really good, obviously there's going to be room for improvement, you know, whether they keep cutting a little bit too quick or whatever. Again, but overall, I think overall it was much, much better. Next, the Shuttle Showdowns and the ultimate Shuttle Showdowns were tension-filled, and they made for gripping viewing. They really got, especially the ultimate Shuttle Showdown. We only had one, and that was Christie versus Victor Axelsen. And I tell you what, the crowd got absolutely the loudness, the volume inside the arena. It was never packed. I'll be honest here. It got better. The number of people in attendance. It did get pretty good by the end. I think finals day was pretty well attended. Obviously, it's not comparable to like an Indonesia Open finals if there's Indonesian players, but it was still pretty decent. But I think that Ultimate Shuttle Showdown happened on like one of the first days. It was definitely day one. I think it was day one actually. No, it was day one. It was the evening match. And you could see everyone was getting super excited. So I think those were nice little additions. There was a little bit of confusion as to how the ends worked. So did players change? How was it decided? And other things such as on the Shuttle Showdown, it was supposed to be that as soon as, say, the fourth game finished, they were supposed to go straight on, stay the same side and basically reset at level and play out the Shuttle Showdown. But in the first match, when we had Kirsty Gilmore have a Shuttle Showdown with Mia Blickfeld, they went off for a towel break and there was coaching involved. That wasn't supposed to happen. So obviously they need to clear up a little bit of the communication. I think they had, but obviously, you know, players are in the heat at the moment. They might forget things. So there was a little bit of confusion to that, but I can't get away from the fact that those two initiatives were very exciting. And obviously they're up to the gods as to whether they happen or not, because players have to have a very even match. Obviously and the Ultimate Shutdown, the teams have to have an overall very steady match. I don't think there's any way they could really try and improve anything to get those situations to happen more. Maybe there is. Maybe someone out there can think of that. But it was gripping viewing. They did reduce the time. So last year it was actually best of 4 games of 10 minutes. This time they reduced it by 2 minutes to 8. And I think the players, even this year, were saying that the matches still were a little bit too long, probably because, say, players like Te, and there was numerous others like Goza Fei, Ramad Hanti, were having to play in both 3v3s. And so if you think that each match was 4 games of 8 minutes, which is 32 minutes. But then obviously if you go to pressure points, that adds a couple of minutes. And obviously I don't think any of those 3v3s went to the Shuttle Showdown, but I think only one did. But if you still think, it probably adds up to, 36, maybe up to 40 minutes, maybe not quite that high each match. And if you're playing 2, you're looking at over an hour. I know they're not I know people say, well, they're not moving as much in the 3v3, but the intensity and the psychological fatigue, the mental fatigue, I could see that on the players after the finals. They were all waiting in the VIP room, and I was there and I was talking to like Mathias Christiansen, Goza Fei, and Te Yi, and Kirsty Gilmore, all the players, and they were saying how like mentally it was quite mentally fatiguing, especially for Rees, because it was so fast and there's just no room for them to think that it does drain on you quite a lot. And obviously the singles players, the timed format was quite psychological, and that's actually another thing. Obviously the time format isn't anything new, but I do feel I want to mention it, that I think it's a really good initiative. Obviously exactly, it's good for production because you know how long each match is going to take. I know the pressure points and the showdowns can add a little bit here and there, but generally speaking, the time thing allows a clearer, more concise production. But I liked how those brought out a psychological battle for the singles players. I heard on commentary, and Victor Axelsen got on commentary, he mentioned it, and I think he said it as in, you can't take too long. You kind of need to rush, especially if you're slightly behind, to catch up the gap, but you don't want to rush too much and lose your patience. So it was kind of that nice balance. And we did see some players could start to get a hang of it. I think Anthony Ginting started to kind of, if you watch each match that he played, by the end he wasn't rushing. Not that he rushed massively at the start, but he started to settle into it. He started to get his groove. Kodai was very good at that from the beginning. All the women's singles players really struggled with it. In all the interviews, post-match interviews with them, you could see they were literally shaking, and they were like, it's so difficult because of that psychological element. Because say in a normal match you're 3 points behind, you're like, okay, I need to catch up this 3 points, but it doesn't matter how long it takes me to catch up this 3 minutes. But here you're like, 3 minutes, I've got to catch up 3 points and I've got 2 minutes to do it in. So if I have a 45-second rally, then I haven't really, and 2 of those, then I haven't got much time to catch up that gap. So you kind of rush, not only rush to get ready, but then in the rally itself, you might force it. And actually, you did see a few players forcing a few things, especially in the first couple of matches. But again, by the end of the week, I think they started to get used to it. So I think if we see this more, we see players start to adapt to this timed format. But again, it's nothing new, the time format, but I did like it. And obviously the reduction from 10 minutes to 8 minutes was good. I think, having watched it, if it was 10 minutes, I think that would have been too long. And I have got a suggestion for the time thing a bit later on. This isn't the section to talk about what I think they can change more. Now, I think this bleeds into the fact that players weren't taking as long in between points. There was an initiative by BXL where if players got a warning, like if they were told, like if they did a time violation, I guess you call it, they would get a warning. If they time violated twice, it was 1 point down. They would get reduced a point. Twice would be 2 points. And then if 2 players within the team were both violated in that same match, then the team would lose 5 overall points, which could have actually, it could be quite important when you get to the end of the group standings. But no one throughout this whole tournament got violated. That sounds a bit wrong. Got a time violation. Although there were a few times the umpires kind of went, players get ready, or use your feet, don't get the moppers on. So for me, again, this isn't something relatively new. The time violation warning system was new, and I think it was quite good because it definitely got the players to kind of hurry through and rush through to get ready. But it kind of shows to me that I think there's a lot of time wasting. It really highlighted to me like how quick the players could get ready. The action was on and on. Obviously, if there was like 10 seconds to go and a player had a 4-point gap and they were on serve, they would like walk around a bit, then they'd change the shuttle. They would kill that last 10 seconds. But you kind of understood that. That's kind of like both sides knew it, that they're, that's just sportsmanship. But overall, throughout the general game, the speed of the rallies was really good. And again, like I said, it shows to me that there's a lot of time wasting at the BDRF events. I know BDRF are looking to bring in a stop clock. It'd be interesting to see how they implement that, how strict they are. Obviously, here at the BXL, they didn't have a top stop clock, although it was definitely something that they wish they could have. So maybe they'll do that in the future. But I think the warning system and just a general, the fact that you've got that, players weren't really time wasting. In fact, they were so much faster between the points it was really, even the court moppers were actually jogging onto court, doing it and then jogging off. So like everything just had this speed to it. And actually it leads into one last change of the time is obviously they reduced the time between games from 2 minutes to 90 seconds, which I thought would also just sped things up and just quickened things. And again, you got back to the action that little bit faster. Next, I love the unity of the team. Again, this isn't necessarily a change. This section should probably be what they changed, but also what I liked. I probably should have said that at the start. I forgot. I loved the unity of the teams. Obviously, that was there last year as well, but obviously this year I got to see it closer because obviously when you're watching it on TV, you're kind of at the mercy of when they show it. But obviously when you're there inside the venue and I got to see them backstage and I got to see this, it was really cool to see how the teams were interacting with each other. Obviously I was there at the media day when the players turned up to do all their photo shoots and interviews, and how those players got to know each other and stuff was really cool, really nice, and quite a unique element because obviously these players are used to, obviously if badminton's an individual sport, I know you're kind of part of a federation team or your own team if you're independent. And obviously there are some team tournaments, but you're with your own countrymen and countrywomen. Here, obviously, it was a mixture of nationalities, of disciplines, but how those players all got on, it was really lovely to see. And I liked the introduction of the captains. I rewatched some of the art last year, and I thought there were captains, what you could deem as captains, maybe they were just coaches. that were part of the teams last year. But obviously this year, the roles of the captains were much clearer, and people knew that that's what they were there for. And they were there to obviously coach the team, select the team, do substitutions, obviously general stuff like that. And their roles were definitely much more clearly defined. And I quite liked how they were decided. It went to a social media vote to decide which captain went to which team, which I thought was quite a nice little unique thing, quite a nice thing that they did for that. And it was great to see captains like, say, Flandy Limpele and Hendriksetti who were known as pretty cool customers. I can remember Flandy Limpele, I'm not sure I should say this, at the World Championships 2007 in Kuala Lumpur. I think he was into the semi-finals of the mixed doubles, and he went to a players' party, I think, the day before, and he was just was so cool, so chilled. So to see him, he was up, he was standing, he was moving, he was pacing, he looked a bit sweaty, he was getting really involved. It was really cool to see that different side. And the Hendriksetti one, he generally was probably the most chilled out of all four captains. Him and Vita Marissa were, I'd say, the two chilled ones. Gracie Polly was most intense, closely followed by Flandy. But it's just to see, obviously there's still moments, say, where Hendriksetti was actually getting up out of the team bench, out of his seat, and would go the other side and stand behind the court and would be supporting and offering advice and getting involved. It got him off his feet. So that was really good. You got to see different sides to those players, to those guys as well. And the last thing about the captains, and this happened, it's not just the captains, because we saw a number of the players get involved, whether that was due to language or they were singles players, so they knew more. But sometimes a player would be there and the captains, and they would, like, if the shuttle was going to drop out, they were shouting, out, 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 like, telling him to leave. You could never do that in a beat-up event. But I think in BXL, it has its place. The captain can pretty much speak whenever they want to. And some of them were actually getting picked up by the courtside microphones. If you watch it, you can hear them. Like, you can definitely hear Gracia Polly a number of times shouting out, out. She was standing right by one of the courtside mics. But I do quite like that. Again, I don't think that's another change, but it's something I liked, that it felt... I'm never one for, say, Americanizing things. I think there's a limit. I don't think we should go completely all in like that. But it was different to BWF, and it was interesting and unique. Again, I don't think in BWF we're going to have coaches being able to move around and speak things during the rally. I think that's not got its place in BWF, but in BXL it does, and it was really, really fun. I liked the unlimited substitutions. That is a change, finally a change. Last year, I think you could only substitute in between games. This time, literally, you could substitute at any point. There was, I think, once where Rutapana Panda came on for 2 rallies and then was substituted off. We saw Gloria Jaja start a match and get substituted after 3 points. Obviously, we saw some other ones, and it just allowed for greater flexibility in these changes. And when you saw a change, you're like, oh, so it allowed for the captain's role and everything. Just, I don't know, it was more exciting. It bled into the whole thing that I thought overran a lot of this, was that there was much more tactical thought behind the matches, especially the 3v3s. I liked how this environment allowed players to show their true characters more. Again, we did see this last year, but to witness it in person was great. And I think with the production improvements, it allowed for this to flourish even more. We got to kind of like see a little bit more of it. The players and the teams, they really had to work together. I was speaking with a few players and they were talking about how they were constantly trying to figure out what's the best lineup, what's the best tactics, what can we do to win this game and stuff. Again, I'm not sure how much that happened last year, because obviously the format was different. You had basically mixed doubles was taken out for 3v3. So 3v3s, although they were worth the most points, they weren't really the centerpiece, whereas this year they were. And so I think there was a lot more discussions around within the team of how to do it. And you started to see, like, there was starting to become, in some teams, clear 3x3s with the 2 men, women, and the opposite. I think like the Blitzers had a pretty much secure set of 3 players for each one. That wasn't the case for a team like the Rockets. They literally didn't have enough players to do that. But I liked how they were trying to figure this out, and then how can they adapt on the fly if things weren't going quite well or whatever. I think the Blitzers only changed it once, where I think they brought on Shetty and Rahayu into the first 3-3, I think to give them, because they were going behind, I think because the Lightning also came in. It was against the Lightning, and they brought on Yuta Watanabe and Alfian. And that was something we hadn't seen, and that was something new. So the Blitzers tried to then counter that, but also with the sight of They knew how big the last 3-3 was, so they wanted Shetty and Raho to have maybe some court time because they'd been starting quite slow in their previous matches and got better, but they wanted them from the beginning. You started to really see the tactical side between the teams, and I really did like that. And that kind of follows on to the last ones. Well, I've got a couple more here. I think this year overall it was more serious, but not so serious that players weren't willing to have fun with it. You still see some good interaction between the players. They were still joking around, laughing, having fun, but there was definitely a little more seriousness, and that was mainly seen in the 3v3s, which is the last thing I want to talk about, because I've seen online, I think there was a Reddit post and someone said, oh, what do we think of the BXL? And a lot of the people, pretty much 95% of the comments were about 3v3s, and they're not that exciting because no players were rotating or moving around each other, or it's just hitting it fast. And if you were one of those people that commented, I would argue that you don't really understand badminton, because maybe it's because you watched it online, maybe it's different, but live, you could see there was so many tactical things going on. Like, no joke. Like, every team tried something different. We saw, the men in the 3v3, 2 female, 1 male player. It started with 1 female at the front, generally speaking, a mixed player. And then you had the other 2, 1 male and 1 female at the back. But then we saw some teams put the male player at the front because being able to intercept and be super quick around the front was proving quite decisive. And so you started to see that switch. Then we saw Yuta Watanabe actually do a mixed double serve and almost take the rear court completely on his own. That didn't last too long. I think there was too many gaps to be had. But we saw other ones where basically it was not like 2 at the back, 1 at the front. It was almost like a 1-1-1. So we had I think Shetty and Goes of Fade did this quite well. Ardianto, when he was on, also where he'd take up a centered role. 1 female player would cover kind of 1 corner at the back. The male player in the center would kind of move in the gaps at the front, but also cover the 1 corner there. And then obviously you had the front court player, usually quite a fast one, or generally speaking, a mixed player, covering the front. So you had that. You had some teams were learning how to rotate around each other. We moved like this. We had players where, especially on the 2 male, 1 female, that 1 male player would always shift in behind, or both of them. There was some points where 3 players were pretty much on the service line. And it was noticeable how, as the course of the week adapted and as it followed on, the teams are clearly, I won't say they were probably practicing in the practice hall, but they might have been, but they were definitely talking about how to approach the 3v3. It's so new, and obviously some players do it as a practice, but generally speaking, I think in there you're not seeing as much. Here it was a competitive scenario with quite a lot of money on the line, so obviously that's kind of forced them to take it a little bit more serious as well. But it was really interesting to see how each team approached it, and obviously then with the substitutions where 1-3 might work in a certain way, and then if you take 1 player out, it might change the dynamic, and then how did they adapt and follow? It was really, really interesting, and I tried to, in my commentary, kind of talk about why this was working or why this was happening and what was happening, but I don't agree with people online saying it was boring or that it was just really, really fast. Yes, you didn't see that many expansive rallies, and maybe it wasn't as physically demanding as, say, doubles because there isn't quite as much movement, but it was still super, super exciting. And we started to see players, like even say, for example, another change was, say, 2 male, 1 female. The first few matches, the females were just pushing, like soft little lays, generally through the center, or they were trying to aim for the middle of the court, kind of between the 3. It seemed like a quite safe area. But then as the week progressed, we started to see players starting to be able to counter that. And so then you start to see returner serves out to the side a bit more, and then trying to use the gap in front, besides the front player. And you started to see all this kind of stuff, and it was just really cool. And again, I mentioned speaking to the players, but for example, I spoke to Mathias Christiansen about the 3v3, and he was like, it really benefited. It was something that obviously played into the hands of front foot playing, fast players, like a lot of the Malaysians and Indonesians. So like Alfian was really good at it. Teo Yi, Goes of Fei, even like Ramad Hanti was really, really good at it on the female side. And he was like, I can't keep up with these, but what I can do is I'm just going to push up as much. And I'm going to try and be the intimidator. So he wasn't like he was pushing up because it was a tactical thing, as in like to get more shots. It was to just try and like apply so much mental pressure onto the other side. So they were even thinking of those things. So for me, the 3v3s, and I think with everything else, like making it more centered, a bigger part of the format, making it more important. I think obviously got the players to take it more seriously, and we started to see all these things. And I think if BXL does expand, I think they want to do multiple events in a year, and you get the same players doing 3v3s more times in the year. We're going to see even more, and we're going to start to see tactics that work, or they're going to find solutions, because there were a lot of things where it was quite difficult for them, or they found it stressed. But I think that they will start to kind of get used to that and find out solutions. That's what the best players in the world are really capable of. And so I absolutely love the free freeze. I knew it was my favorite thing from last year, and this year it just went up a notch. And I hope that the BXL obviously continue to make it a part of the centerpiece. So, speaking of which, I did really, really love the 3v3s. Before I get into what I think could be changed, I just want to quickly go over my own experience. I'm not going to spend too long on this. But yeah, no, I obviously, as you can imagine, as you can guess, I had an absolutely brilliant time. It's another chance to travel to Indonesia. I do travel to Jakarta pretty much once every year, and I spend a good 3 or 4 weeks in Jakarta. And I do like being there, and I do travel around to different parts of Indonesia. I love the country, I love the food, I love the people. So it was great to have another opportunity to go there. And obviously, to be able to go to the Istora Senayan again, I hadn't been there in 10 years. The last time I'd gone to watch badminton in the Istora was the 2015 World Championships. And obviously the arena has been updated since then. The seating looks a lot nicer than it was in 2015. But it's always really good to see badminton in there. And although the crowds obviously weren't nowhere near the same level of those World Championships, it was still really cool to see the crowd. And they were getting into it. I think as the week got on, players, everyone I was speaking to, some of the fans that I met, they were all saying how much they enjoyed it and how much of an experience. So that leads on to one other change. That obviously the ticketing, they brought the pricing down, so it was a lot more affordable. They put on almost like a fan area out the front. It had a court, it had an interactive thing. There was some special designs made by a local artist. They had signings, they had meet and greets, they had lots of food stalls, drink stalls, which I did frequent quite a bit before. Obviously, they had things called like a Superfan, where you had seats behind the court, but you could also go around the back into the players' warm-up area and watch the teams warm up. As the week went on, that area got really, really busy. More and more people saw the benefit and the beauty of seeing that. And obviously, to get to that, you had to go around the back where a lot of the players would be walking around, so there was plenty of opportunities to have photos. I took not as popular as the players, but I took a lot of photos with fans in that area, because that's where I would be hanging out in between matches. So I think in terms of what they're offering for the fans as well, that was definitely a huge change. I'm pretty sure they didn't have that last year, and so that was really good. And that, again, the warm-up area is something that you would never get at a BDO event. That's almost like a sacred area. So I've been to the All England with a media accreditation, so I can get to the media area, I can go backstage, I can go most places. But the warm-up area is a place that I'm not allowed to go to. You have to be like really high up, obviously one of the players, the coaches, and very high up on the official staff. So I like the fact that they open it up. I understand why BWF can't do it, because obviously the federations are quite protective. It's a very serious tournament. They don't want fans in there distracting the players in their practice. But even here, the BXL players were allowed to. Obviously they could see the courts, the practice courts, but they were gated off, as in they couldn't just go on. They couldn't walk around the courts. They had designated seating. Obviously, players came over, then they would come in for photos, but it wasn't overly that distracting. So maybe it's something that the BRF could actually do. I think it would be quite a cool, unique thing. But at the BXL, it's something that they changed for this year, and I thought it was really, really good. So I completely forgot about the stuff outside of the badminton. That was so good, and I know they're always looking at what they can do more to make the fan experience as best, as amazing as they possibly can. So back to my experience. Like I said, it was absolutely brilliant. To be backstage, to get to know some of the players. Well, I knew some of the players beforehand. Mainly through online, they might have known who I was, but I got to have fun with some of the players. I had a funny interaction with Goza Fate, because I interviewed him, did a post-match interview, and he's quite an introverted person, quite a shy person, so he was quite awkward in front of the camera, which is understandable, it's fine. I'm kind of the same. I kind of had to force myself when I did that to be a little bit different. And then there was one where I was going to interview his 3v3, and he like basically said no, and they caught it on like the social media camera. And so I had a joke, and then when I came on court for the last my last post-match interview, no, my second, it was on the final. I saw Goes Fei, and I kind of like saw him, and I pointed at him and said, "Come on, let's go." And he kind of like, we laughed and joked about it, and then backstage afterwards, shook hands and had a good time together. So, to be able to kind of mix and mingle with some of the top players, get to talk to them, pick their brains about certain things. Obviously commentating was brilliant. It was a really good experience. The guy I was commentating with was Des Corkill. He's had decades of experience. He was absolutely brilliant. He guided me through everything. He gave me advice. He told me what was good, what was not. He made me feel so at ease, because I was incredibly nervous heading into the first one, because obviously I do these videos, but I can edit them, so if there's ever any sections, and this does happen, I'll be honest with you, I'm like, that was crap, or that's not that good, or whatever, right? Or okay, I've changed my mind, and I can cut it out. Obviously on a broadcast where you're going live, can't do that. But he was so supportive. He showed me the ropes, and that goes out towards not just Des, but the whole production. There's a massive team there. We had a Korean team in the broadcasting. They were the main guys there for that. They were brilliant. They, so supportive of me, giving me ideas, giving me thoughts, giving me feedback, and just I felt so like at ease. They made me feel confident in what I was doing, and then we had the people involved with the graphics and lining everything up, and that was a Malaysian Singaporean team. There were so many people that went into that thing, and there were other people that organised the transport, did this, got the food there. I honestly, I have no bad words to say about any of it. Everyone was really lovely, so nice, so accommodating, and really made me feel at ease. Because like I said, I was nervous, I was daunted, but I'll be honest, I was more nervous about doing the post-match interviews, because that was something that I was told possibly might happen before I went, but it wasn't until I got there that they were like, you are doing them. You're going to do, there was another person, the MC, called Kenny, a very energetic lady who you will hear at the beginning of each broadcast. She's like this, real character, and I'm like, and she did the first interview, and it was so full of energy, and I was like, and then Des turned to me, turned off his mic, and went, "She's good. You're." It didn't make me feel very good at that time, but then he was like, "No, don't worry. Be yourself. You've got a different angle to her. You know badminton better than she does. You know these players better. Just do what you do. Just pick up on a small thing that you saw happen." And so I was like, okay. So again, he gave me the confidence, and after I did the first one, after the first day or the first session, I started to ease into it. Started to not rush, because if you watch really closely, there's times when I'm holding the mic. I'm not sure if you can see. My hand was literally like this, because I was nervous. There was even one where I held the mic at the bottom. I was interviewing Michelle Lee, and on the broadcast you can't hear a freaking word I'm saying, because that's the receiver. And it wasn't until afterwards they went, "Ben, you're holding the receiver." So I had to hold it further up. But I didn't know that. And we did go over a few things I needed to do, but that was one question I didn't ask, or something that wasn't done. But you learn, and I learned from it. I learned a lot on this trip. And alongside what I want you to do for this video, obviously, please do give me your own thoughts on what my commentary is like and the interviews. But yeah, no, my experience was absolutely fantastic. I hope I get to do it again. I think I did a good enough job to get a warrant to get called back, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. Obviously, once I know and once I can say, I will. But I really hope, I want to be part of BXL for as long as it's around, because it was really fun, it was really cool, really unique, and it gave a chance. I think for me, the way I approached it was, I knew it's not going to be as serious as say BWF, so I wanted my commentary to also be more fun. Obviously, I'm there to analyse, and I'm there to offer thoughts and what's going on, but also to be entertaining. Me and Des, we were joking around in commentary, I was trying to kind of do that. And in my interviews as well, towards the end, I started to kind of joke with players, or try to kind of, rather than you sometimes see as post-match interviews where it's literally, "How do you feel?" or "What was this? What was that?" I try to, obviously they got those questions in there, but I try to always think of things that might, make it a bit more entertaining, a bit more fun. And I don't know whether that came across that way, but that's what I was trying. And obviously the more I do it, the better I'll get. So yeah, my experience was absolutely brilliant. I loved it, and I can't wait. And the fans, everyone there, thank you. Everyone that spoke to me, took photos of me, came up to me, or even some people wanted to interview me in the media zone, which I thought was a bit strange, but that was quite cool. It was just a really good experience, and I hope to do it again. So I've got a few things here that I would change. I think the big change that I think could be implemented, and this is not my idea actually, it's something that Des, my co-commentator, said, because he was first and foremost a producer, so he was going through this. Is how are the teams? So how do you get people to support a certain team? What is the reason to get behind a team? I think that's lacking a little bit. That's something that they are aware of. Because at the moment, you would go, say, you probably support, say, you're a big fan of Jonathan Christie. He was in the Blitzers. You might support the Blitzers. But that's not strong enough because you might go, there'll be a lot of people that would support Christie. So they would support the Blitzers for that match. But then they might support Ardianto, and he was part of the Rockets. So then for his match, they might support the Rockets. So how do you get people to really get behind a team? Whether you do it geographically, I'm not sure you would go like, say you have, because obviously they're looking to kind of put 4 events in a year in different places. You could have those 4 teams, say it's Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and say Singapore. I'm not saying those are the 4 places, but say they are. You could have that. I'm not saying that they need to be filled with just those players, because obviously you want European players, you want all sorts, but maybe a core group within that team. Say it's Malaysian, it could be say 4 of the players, like half the team is Malaysian and half the team is made up of other players. I'm not sure whether that's a solution, but there needs to be something to get people behind certain teams, especially if they're looking to make this into a bigger, like say 4 thing. You want fans to get behind their team, and obviously as it builds towards say the last event, the finale, the people are really invested. They're not just invested in the players; they need to be invested in the team. So I think that's something that could be looked at. Now, I know a few people did mention to me that the team benches last year were next to each other, so there could have been this interactivity between the teams, a bit of fun joking back and forth. Here they were on not just opposite sides, but literally diagonally across from each other, and you could see the 2 teams. So Lee Chuk Yu was one that was all, because he wasn't playing too much because of his ankle, but he was standing up and he was like, there was a lot of back and forth between him and any team that he was playing against. So maybe there's a way to kind of, I don't know, I understand why they were on opposite sides and on, basically diagonally is because the bench was the SPO TV Now team bench, because that's where they potentially want some sponsorship logos. So you need to be able to have a camera angle from both to get that. But maybe they can think of a way where they can tick that box but get more interactivity between the 2 benches. I mean, there was still some. You could definitely see it. It was quite fun. But maybe, I'm not sure you could have them next to each other. I don't know how that would work, because obviously if you're behind them as a fan, you can't, maybe you're slightly closer, but it's behind them. Maybe, I don't know. It's something to think about, because there was a lot of interactivity between the benches, and maybe how they can use that to create more narrative or to create some more moments for social media or for other things. It's something to consider. I think there definitely could be more innovative ways to design the team benches and how the players' captains interact with them. Now, I think the BXL initially wanted players to go into the team bench in the switch of ends, but they couldn't really do that here because the team benches round the court was a full A board, and in a corner it could open, but it was quite. You couldn't really climb over it very well, and with only 90 seconds and you got to change ends, by the time you get into the bench you'd have to come straight back out. So I think they are thinking of ways for next time to have it built into the A board, so you, like the team benches, maybe in the games it would open, like the team benches might spread across a bit more, and they might have a part where once the game's over it opens up and the players can go into the team area and then have a team huddle, a team chat, and all that kind of stuff. And so maybe that they are looking at ways to kind of do that, but definitely they need to figure out ways that the team benches can be more interactive with the court. They were a little bit too separate, so you didn't really get the interactive. That leads on to another one, is they did have kit boxes, but again, for the same reasons, players couldn't really get out to them very easily. So they had their bags in there, but then they would take their spare rackets, towels, and drinks and have them on top of the A-boards, which did look a little messy. And I'm sure if they're looking to get more sponsors, that's something that doesn't look particularly good. So how do they kind of get that more incorporated as well? And obviously, I said this to a guy called Stephen who works at Hyperspeed SPO TV. He's the guy, kind of one of the main guys behind all this. When I turned up and I saw the kit boxes, and I went, how are players going to do the racket swaps? Because one of the most unique things about badminton is, well, one thing that is unique to badminton is racket swap, because strings break far more often in badminton than they do, say, in tennis or squash. And so what's quite exciting is when a player breaks a string and they have to run off court and try and get a new one. It's something that always gets, it's some excitement. It's something the commentators always talk about. It's something that we would talk about. We didn't see many of those at this thing. They tried it because obviously they'd have players, like they put their rackets out and sometimes players might throw them a racket. But they could think of ways of how to utilize that moment in badminton a little bit more into thing. Again, it's going to come down to how they design the area around the court with the A boards and the team benches and all that kind of stuff. But it's something that they definitely need to think about is where do players put their drinks and towels? Maybe that's going to be part of these way they can innovate, incorporate the team benches into that. But it's the racket swapping, because that to me is something that's unique to badminton and definitely is something that's exciting. Next one. I talked about the kitboxes. I think, we've already spoken about more different camera angles. Obviously, they are looking to try and play around. Even on finals day, they had some down by the surface judge. I think they had an above one. I'm not sure how... We've seen that in some tournaments where there's a camera directly above, so you can see how the player's moving on. I've never been a big fan of that. Like, it's okay as like a replay, but it's... I don't know. Badminton is not just side-to-side, there's up and down as well, so it's not quite so good. I think the nice camera angle one that... but they're definitely thinking about it. But I think it's quite difficult to say that nice camera angle one. It's quite difficult to market that, but they're going to have to think of ways. I think a stop clock for serves could be quite useful. That's something they did try to have, or they were thinking of, and they wish they had incorporated it, but it didn't turn out to be much of a problem. Players weren't really time wasting. And so, I'm not quite sure with certain elements. For example, in the last minute, there was like a bongo drum. I'm not sure if you could hear it on the thing, but in the arena, it's like boom, 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 to kind of like add more tension when it's the last minute. If then you had a stop clock, which would then, I know I was speaking to Des, who was a commentator on the Purple League in Malaysia, which had a stop clock, and it would have like a really loud thing. It would only be 15 seconds. Obviously, if you couldn't have two sounds playing over each other. So again, whether they opt for a stop clock, it could be quite interesting. But with the timer and everything already, again, I'm not sure about that, but maybe it's something they could look into. I think for timed games, they could possibly make it even shorter. So they could make it 6 minutes. I think any less than that, unless you literally allow that when in between rallies, the stop clock, the timer stops, it'd be too quick. A lot of games, there was a few games where I completely forgot about the time, and suddenly I look up and it's like, I hear the noise, the dun dun, the bongo drum thing, and I was like, oh, it's a minute left. So you did get absorbed into it, and it never felt like it dragged. There was never a game that dragged, but maybe there's an angle that you could make it slightly shorter. But if they don't change that, I don't think that's much of an issue. I think they could, substitutions, again, this has some other areas anything out. Maybe substitutions for singles as well. Obviously, the problem with that is you would need to have larger teams because you would need probably like 2, maybe even 3 singles players, probably 2 minimum. I know the Rockets had that in Kodai and Lee Chuk-yu. But I think that would be quite a cool initiative, actually. That'd be quite interesting. That would definitely add, because obviously different players have different styles, and if you could throw that in, it adds this other element of when do you do it, or this. So maybe like, say, someone who's really fast, like Anthony Ginting, you bring him on for the last 2 minutes and you go blasting out. But the risk is that he hasn't played, he hasn't got a feel for the game, so he might be a bit cold. See how I mean? There's loads of ways that you think about this. Another thing could be done is, possibly, say you substitute a singles player for a doubles player. Every point he wins is worth 2. That could be quite cool. Like, you allow the doubles players. I'm not sure whether they want to risk playing singles, because obviously you've got to think about, I don't want to injure myself here for this tournament. But that could add another interesting element. So a doubles player comes onto singles court. Every point they win is worth 2. And vice versa. You could do that for the 3-3s. We saw some of the singles players come on and do all right, but they were never really too involved because most teams, bar the Rockets, had enough players to kind of doubles players. But maybe if you brought a singles player on, again, you could double the points they win. So it might entice those players to be used, so they get to see these kind of players in different environments. We get to see a doubles player play singles, which not many doubles players would want to do that, I granted, especially against some of the best players in the world, but it would be quite interesting. And you wouldn't see it too often, but it might just entice it. And vice versa, singles players, they might risk, okay, they might not be as strong in this 3-3, but their points now they're on court is worth double. So maybe it's worth the risk. I just think that something like that is quite a cool way I think that could actually add another element and get you to see players in another different light, which I think is overall the theme behind BXL. Okay, so I've got 3 more things. The last one is, this is the only thing, is the final and dead games. There were sometimes when a game had gone 3-0, so technically the last game was dead. This is definitely in the final. There was a bit of misunderstanding in the final. In the first 3-3, it was 3-0 to Hurricanes and everyone stopped. Only then the producers were like, no, we need to play the 4th game because that's, people have come here to pay money. They can make it more exhibition style, but we need to play it. Obviously, in the last 3v3, where the actual match was completely dead, they didn't. They just ended it. But maybe that's something they just need to think about. I understand in the groups it makes sense to play the 4th game because games difference was quite important. So if you won 4-0, it was quite important as to, it meant more than winning 3-1. Although most players, if they went up 3-0, the 4th game ended up being a bit dead anyway. So I'm not sure the players were quite understanding that. So that, again, that's something maybe they can just either try to communicate that, or they can maybe, I don't know, maybe there's something they can do to make the last game even more meaning something. But, I don't know about that one. How the teams were decided could also be an event. Obviously, the teams, once the players decided, the teams, I'm not quite sure how they would decide. Obviously, they would try to be split around to make the teams relatively even. Whoever was in charge of that did a pretty good job. The teams were pretty even. There were some teams that had some advantages over others, but all in all, as we saw, a number of teams lost to one and beat another, and there was a lot of kind of like back and forth. But maybe like we saw the captains get decided by a social media vote. Maybe the same could be done for the players. There's other ways you work with that. Say all 4 singles players. There's 4 singles players. They get voted into their team. Then it's the women's singles, and then it's the maybe doubles players. But like this specific, they could be linked into types or something. This wouldn't be there's not going to be a perfect world where there'll be 4 of each. But say you got 4 power players or rear players. Where do they go? Net players, where do they go? So like, again, you could try to do that. It might get a little bit too complicated, but getting the fans interacted might be another way. That one I said at the start about how do you get behind a team, maybe that could be a solution. You could get a few players that were decided, core members of the team. So say we did the example of the geographical, you had an 8-person team, sorry. 4 of those players are, say it's from Malaysia, they're Malaysian, they get decided. And then the additional 4, they're voted on. That could be quite good. So yeah, or obviously you could just have like an auction situation. So if there was money, players, each team gets given a certain amount of money to kind of buy players or auction them into their team. Again, there's lots of ways, but I think how the teams are decided could be made as part of the event rather than, okay, these are the teams. I just think, having the fans or somewhere there's a bit of decision making behind the teams. And lastly, and I think this is a big one, and I know they know this, is the marketing. Again, last year I said they announced the event and did all the marketing very late, and it was the same thing this year. Now, I know this year they were trying to do it a bit earlier. There were a few issues that got in their way, with one of those being that the riots in Jakarta meant that they didn't feel it was really a wise or the right time to go. There's all this unrest and rioting and just stuff going on in Jakarta at the time, to then try and advertise for a badminton event. It just didn't seem right, so they pushed it back to that, kind of calm down a little bit. But definitely, I think moving forward, they need to obviously market these events far more in advance. But speaking to a number of the people behind it, they only did about 1 month. They would ideally want 3 to 6 months. So if they can obviously do that first 3 to 6, a full 3 to 6 months marketing campaign, I think we'd see more people in the arena. We'd see more people interested online. They did quite well to get. It was definitely improved on last year in terms of everything, views online and people in attendance and people just going to the venue to kind of check out the outside part, and the interactivity and all that thing. That definitely had improved. But they know that there is plenty more room for improvement. So those are all of my thoughts on this event. My experience, what I liked, what was changed that I liked, what could be changed more. And now I want to hear your opinions. And don't want to know your opinions on what I did, my involvement. I want your opinions on absolutely everything. Because, like I said, the BXL were not just willing, they actually were willing to listen to people as the event was going on. There was one where I got a comment. Someone said, we'd love to hear what the captains, were saying. And I mentioned this, and they then tried to mic. We saw in a few events that the captains were mic'd up. And we were told, as commentators, to give explicit instructions to stay quiet during this so we could hear it. That kind of faded a little bit towards the end of the tournament, but again, it shows that they were willing to try to listen to certain things and to change things on the fly. So they are quite open. And like I said at the start, they saw my video last year and they took it seriously. They didn't take it as a joke. They took it seriously and they tried to implement it in their own way. And this year, they spoke to me about the same things. What do you think could be changed? Now, I've given my thoughts here, but I said to them that I was part of it. So I can't give a full holistic opinion on a lot of things because I didn't watch it as much. I was in it. So, but I know that you guys watching, always in all my videos like this, some of the comments, pretty much all of them, they're nice. We don't get many shitty comments in this thing. You know, people are arguing over bullshit. I quite like that. We've built a bit of a community here. And there's a lot of good stuff that comes from this channel personally. I do genuinely believe that. And I said, well, why don't you just let me ask people? And then obviously they can read the comments or I can compile them into my own document and send that to BXL. So your thoughts, your opinions in the comment section, you might see some of those ideas actually get put into reality in future BXL events. And I'm not just saying that to sound good. Genuinely, they will. Genuinely, they will. I will be in conversation with the BXL. There will be follow-ups, and I will be laying out every single one of your ideas. Now, I know I'm going to get there will be some ideas that probably aren't so good, some that are going to be absolutely brilliant. It doesn't matter. If you've got an idea, I want you to put it in the comment section below. And if that isn't enough to entice you, I'm going to actually link it with a giveaway. Okay, so basically I have on me, I don't have them right here, I'm going to go get them in a second actually, but let me finish this little intro to this part. I have 3 t-shirts that were for 3 of the players that were involved in the BXL, but they didn't need to use them. They're still in their original wrapper, but they've got their name on the back. So you can buy merchandise, but it will never have the player's name on the back unless you do it yourself. So these are official t-shirts that have never been worn, but were for the players. Those players are Lai Pei Jing from the Blitzers, Chirag Shetty from the Blitzers, and Mathias Christiansen from the Hurricanes. I have those 3 shirts with me in my flat right now. So if you want to have a chance to win them, there's going to be 3 winners here, by the way. You need to do this. First of all, you need to like this video. You need to be a subscriber of my channel. Obviously, I've got to get something out of this. And then all I want you to do is comment below what you think you'd like to see changed. What do you think could be improved upon for next year's BXL event? And I also, past that, I want you to comment which player's t-shirt that you want. From that, I'm going to pick 3 random winners. Or I might even do it on personally who I think has the best idea. Because I think that would probably be a better way of deciding it. I'm not quite sure yet, but there are going to be 3 winners I'm going to pick. Obviously, they will all have to have different players they want as well, because I only have 1 of each t-shirt. And yeah, that's it. So if you like the video, subscribe to the channel, put your comment in telling me what you think BXL could do better and which player's t-shirt you want. You could be in with a chance of winning it. So I'm going to quickly pause and grab those t-shirts to prove to you that I've got them. They are in the wrapper. But I'll show, okay? Give me 1 second. Okay, I'm back. I've got the shirts here. So, oh, it's stuck. It says Lai, can you see? Probably not. No, it's not going to show here. But that is Lai Pei Jing's Blitzers t-shirt. This is Mathias Christiansen's Hurricanes t-shirt. And this one's Chirag Shetty. It has Shetty Blitzers on it and the size. So obviously Christiansen and Shetty are a large and Lai Pei Jing's a medium. I think she'd be a small. But anyway, you have the chance to win these t-shirts with that giveaway. So that's all you need to do. Again, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment below what you think BXL could do better, as well as which player's t-shirt you want to win. And I will pick 3 winners and I will send you these t-shirts as soon as possible. So with that, I'm going to sign off this video. Thank you ever so much for watching. Obviously, it's going to be a busy month. There's back to the BDF breakdowns. I've got 4 tournaments in a row now. That's going to be busy, but it's the Arctic Open this week, and I'm looking forward to watching all the action there. Yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one.